Welcome to this week's lecture on children and parenthood. Quality time is a phrase that we have tossed around in public discourse frequently with regards to children. But for dual income parents, it is a struggle to manufacture quality time. Quality time has now become synonymous with good parenting. Working parents have to concern themselves with childcare. A 2010 study found that the effects of early childcare are significant. Higher quality early childcare predicted higher cognitive achievement at age 15. So the kind of care that you're getting at ages 3 and 4 impact the kind of achievement you're going to be doing at age 15. It also had a positive effect on moms. It was correlated with mothers experiencing less depression. Yet the average quality of daycare centers is in fact mediocre. Care for infants is particularly lacking. This is largely due to the fact that the positions offer low pay and thus have a high turnout rate, and it's a high stress occupation. Children are expensive. The average cost of a baby's first year is about $26,000. Cost of childcare for an average family is about $18,000 a year, and that's probably not high quality care. 75% of U.S. families are in fact overwhelmed by the cost. 42% don't even budget for it. Average cost of daycare for 2 children largely depends on where you live. Notice it's most expensive in the Northeast. Childcare costs, when we look at the percent of income that it costs for this kind of care, you can see the dark green there is infant, the lighter green is 4 years old, and the gray is infant and 4 years old. This does not include the cost of in-home care providers. You can see that a single parent at a median income with just an infant, that's 46% of their income. 4-year-old, 36%. If they have an infant and a 4-year-old, that's 84% of their income. A family at median income is doing better because you got those 2 incomes, but you can still see that 2 children eats up a significant portion of income. And if a family is at the poverty level, it's more than they can afford. There are places in the United States where child daycare costs are actually more substantial than public college tuition. So the purple is daycare costs, and the red is public college tuition. And you can see that there are many places where the cost of daycare actually exceed the cost of public college tuition, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. We have a lot of cultural messages around children and having children in general. Some of them include this: have fun before you have children, which sort of implies that once you have children, there's no more fun to be had. Marriage has no meaning without children. So once folks get married, there's all this pressure to have children. And that's because in this country, we have this sort of pronatalism, this cultural view that encourages having children. Married couples end up being encouraged to have families by both their friends, families, religion, government. Married couples without children pay more taxes than couples with children. The economy encourages having children as well. These periods of affluence correlate with a higher birth rate. And we have these cultural observances that are really around the production of children: Mother's Day, Father's Day, Grandparents' Day. 4 million babies are born every single year. More than a third of them are unplanned. Having children, however, is a major goal of young adults. Those surveyed between the ages of 18 and 29, 74% of them say they want children. They also rated being a good parent as above having a successful marriage in terms of things they desired or things that were important to them. In this country, we do have procreative liberty, and as we have the freedom to decide whether or not to have children. More women are deciding not to have children. We have reduced numbers of children. 18% of women between the ages of 40 to 44 have never had children, and that has doubled since 1976. And 44% of that group chose to not have children. There's a stigma around childlessness. Intentionally child-free couples are viewed with suspicion, often seen as selfish. makes people uncomfortable, subject to rejection and pity. The stereotypes abound that those people are immature and unfulfilled. Um, there's a rise of the one-child family. 23% of American families only have one child. In New York City, that number now tops 30%. In the 1950s, American parents had 3.7 children on average, but in 2014, American parents have 1.9. We also have a boomerang generation. 25% of adults 18 to 34 have moved back in with their parents. The reason has to do with economics. The economy, of course, is not great. This generation has come out to the worst economy in recent history. So that has forced many of them to come back and live with their parents. There's a lot of interest around birth order. There are some mythologies and stereotypes around birth order. Typically, we associate the firstborn child with being the achiever, the middle child with being the negotiator, the youngest with being the charmer, and only children are like a turbo version of the firstborn. Firstborn children are assumed to be natural leaders, high achievers, organized, on time, know-it-alls, bossy, responsible, adult pleaser, and obeys the rules. You can decide for yourself if you're a firstborn, if that describes you or someone you know. Middle children are considered to be flexible, easygoing, social peacemakers, independent, secretive, may feel life is unfair, strong negotiators, and generous. Lastborn tend to be risk takers, outgoing, creative, self-centered, financially irresponsible, competitive, bored easily, like to be pampered, and have a sense of humor. Only children are largely regarded to be close to their parents, have a lot of self-control, to be leaders, mature, dependable, demanding, unforgiving, private, and sensitive. I can tell you I have 3 children, and these don't fit any child for their birth order. There's not been a ton of data to support these characterizations, but we still tend to cling to them. You see people post about them all the time on Facebook or bring it up in conversation. We have a little culture of competitive birthing, at least in some pockets of the United States, which is a desire to have the same number of children as your peers. Sometimes this is the outcome of competitive career moms, women who've opted out of the workforce, live in the suburbs, surrounded by other moms with resources and time on their hands. The average age of the first-time mom in the United States is 25.1. In the UK, it's 30. The average age for first marriage is 27 for women, 29 for men. In the United States, among college-age women, the average age at first birth is 30. So you can see that if you have more education, you're going to wait longer to have that first kid. Only 12% of births to college graduates are unmarried. Women without college degrees are very likely to have a child before getting married. If you're a high school dropout, your average age at first birth is 20. Average age of marriage is 25. High school graduates who have some college, their average age of first birth is 24. Average marriage age is 27. 58% of first births in this group are to unwed mothers. Average age of men at first birth is 27.4. If a man has a bachelor's degree, that number goes up to 30.8. If he only has some college, it's 26.9. High school only, it's slightly below that average at 25.6. And if he dropped out, it's even lower. So we can see that level of education is highly correlated with age at first birth and age of marriage, and whether or not that first birth occurred within a marriage. Couples married at the time of first birth have a 13% chance of separating within the first 5 years, but cohabitating couples who were living together, not married at the birth of the first child, their chances of breaking up within that same period are 39%. There's been an increasing number of women delaying childbearing for educational and career goals. Delayed pregnancy risks include the risk for spontaneous abortion, first trimester bleeding, low birth weight, increased labor time, meaning it takes you longer to deliver your child, C-section. Further, chromosomal abnormalities increase for women who are over 30 and men over 55. And there's a sharp decline in fertility rates for women over 40. Inability to achieve pregnancy after at least 1 year of regular sex without birth control, or the inability to carry pregnancy to live term, is referred to as infertility. Primary infertility refers to you've never conceived a child. Secondary infertility means you have conceived a child in the past, but you are currently unable to achieve a pregnancy. And we see this a lot. Someone's had a child and then they have a period of infertility. Pregnancy wastage refers to being unable to conceive and unable to produce live birth. 40% of infertility cases are attributed to the female, 40% are attributed to the male, and 20% to both parties. But unexplained infertility is actually the most common diagnosis. But excuse me, but the good news is when you have unexplained fertility, if that's a diagnosis like, hey, you're infertile, but we don't know why, that's associated with a high probability of achieving a pregnancy. So just to be clear, in that 40-40-20 we just talked about, excuse me, that's in situations where they know the cause. So when they know the cause of infertility, 40% is attributed to the woman, 40 to the man, 20 to both parties. But more often than not, they have no idea why it's happening. Delaying a pregnancy delaying pregnancy in general until age 30 is associated with difficulty getting pregnant. Delaying up to 35, delaying to age 35 and older is associated with preterm birth and stillbirth. Infertility may be diagnosed after only 6 months in women over 35 years of age. So notice the standard definition is, you've been at this a year, but if you're over 35, 6 months. And then they'll start trying to, intervene if that's what you want. About 20% of U.S. couples of reproductive age are in fact infertile. Only 8 to 10% in developed countries. There are a lot of negative emotions experienced with the frustration of infertility. But women tend to be more committed to finding a solution than their partners. And that's probably because there's sort of this motherhood mandate and sort of cultural notion there's something wrong with a woman if she does not care for a child. Some reproductive problems are associated with changing lifestyles, reducing stress, avoiding strenuous exercise, maintaining an average weight for your height, etc. What are the characteristics of folks who tend to adopt? They tend to be white, educated, and have a higher income. Adoptees are increasingly placed with non-traditional families, however. No negative effects have been found when adoptive parents are gay or lesbian. The most in-demand adoptees are white, healthy infants. The least desired adoptees are older. They're racially or ethnically different than the adopters. Have siblings, have physical or developmental disabilities. The waiting period for a healthy white infant, is 5 to 10 years. 1.6 million adoptees under the age of 18, and 54% of them are from other countries. Children who are adopted after infancy often have developmental delays. Sometimes they have attachment disturbances, PTSD. As adults, their mental health is on par with non-adopted adults. So, you have this period of adjustment, but then it works itself out. In terms of costs, the cheapest source for a child to adopt is the U.S. foster care system because the state provides subsidies. The step-parent kinship adoptions would also be one of the cheaper ones. Private agency adoptions, those are between $5,000 and $40,000 and up. International adoptions are about $7,000 to $30,000. In the United States, we very much prefer to have our own children. This is because of the primacy of genetic parenthood. For us, that biological bond is paramount. He's got your eyes. He looks like you. For some, adoption cannot provide the biological connection, and it leaves adoptees feeling that they're lacking a crucial part of their identity. The transition to parenthood is actually associated with downturns in marital satisfaction for most couples. It's associated with an increase in conflict and a reduction in companion activity. Marital satisfaction tends to be affected more adversely in women than men. Ambiguity surrounds parenthood because a little is known about the long-term outcomes of various child-rearing styles. Nuclear families are now smaller, they have fewer resources, they're isolated far from extended families, and parenting is now a private activity rather than a community obligation. For the father, upcoming parenting and changes in their partner can make a man feel vulnerable. He may experience joy, anticipation, stress, anxiety. Fathers are now encouraged to be in U.S. delivery rooms as part of the effort to make them feel more included in what is happening. Top issues for men. For men, the top transition issues tend to include financially providing for the family, a lack of sleep and tiredness, increased chores and housework, intrusive in laws, loss of free time for self and social activities, a decline in the spouse's sexual interest, and couples' disagreements around the roles they are to play. In addition to that, we have a media reification of the idea of inept male. We start to see this around the 1950s. Excuse me. Alongside the typical portrayals of the 1950s father who is wise and benevolent and a foundation of trust and support, we have this show, The Honeymooners, which many people point to as the genesis of the bumbling male archetype. He, by contrast, is inept. He's clueless as a husband, as a father, and as a friend. So we see this evolution of representation of dads on television. The dads of the 50s are close to perfect. They're part of an idealized white American family. In the early 80s, we have a little bit of a shift from, the wise but somewhat detached father to the caring dads of a new generation who don't mind if their wives make more money and they're in touch with their feelings. And then by the late 80s, we have this new model. And so by contrast to the 50s, we have this one show with the bumbling male. In the late 80s, we start to get lots of shows with the bumbling male. Here are just a few of them. You can probably think of other examples that you have also seen where the husband and father and the family is presented as, he's probably capable at work, but then at home, he's just all but useless. This is expanded to films as well. If you saw Knocked Up, both of the men portrayed there were the bumbling male. You saw this film, Hall Pass, all of these guys are that model as well. Even advertising is using the bumbling male archetype. The Sonic commercial on the left, the husband thinks the hot fudge shake will be too hot to drink, and the wife has to explain how hot fudge works. And the right, the wife tricks her husband into eating these fiber bars with her superior wisdom, because, if he was left on his own devices, who knows what he would fill himself with. This is an ad for paint. The storyline is that the kids and the dad are Skyping with mom. They've cleaned up the space on the wall. So the opening of the commercial is just this nice Skype conversation. Yeah, mom, everything is great. We're about to take a bath. And then as they close the computer screen, we can see the kitchen is a disaster. The implication here being that if you leave the kids with dad, this is the kind of thing that will happen. This commercial presents mom coming in from shopping. Dad's not been alone with the kids very long, but while she was gone, he's decided to make socks out of glue. This Huggies commercial was pulled because it was so controversial. I think the voiceover says it all. To prove Huggies can handle just about anything, we put them to the toughest test imaginable. Dads alone with their babies in one house for 5 days. So this is the idea that men fathering their children is the toughest test imaginable, because who knows what these men might do to babies. There are obviously lots of concerns about this bumbling male archetype. Men see this bumbling dad and think that's what's expected of them and rise to those low expectations. Girls and women may have low expectations for their husbands and how they will handle fatherhood because of these continual and pervasive presentations. It can actually create a new norm as opposed to what being a father used to mean. By the later half of the 20th century, more men were interested but unsure of their acumen and looking to wives to anticipate and plan for children's needs. The culture of fatherhood changed more rapidly than the conduct of fatherhood. So the new conception is man as sole breadwinner. That new conception of man as sole breadwinner declined 60% in 1950 to 14% in 1990. So in other words, men as the sole breadwinner is no longer the most common family configuration. Now, men feel freer to participate. Studies show that men can actually interact with and care for their children as well as women. Many are just held back because of these social norms and these sort of social stories and ideas around men and fatherhood. For women, the top transition issues tend to be lack of sleep and tiredness, changes in body and figure, personal doubts about parental competence or skills, unpredictable shifts in mood and anxiety, dissatisfaction with personal appearance, increased chores and housework, individual stress about roles and responsibilities, and their change in the work situation. So you can see that the top concerns about transition have some overlap, but also some differences. The current view of motherhood is very much that of the motherhood mystique. The motherhood mystique works like this. It puts forth the idea that fulfillment as a woman depends on being a mom, that all the jobs assigned to moms fit together logically, that a woman must like being a mom at all times, and it assumes a mother's intense, exclusive devotion to her kids is in fact a good thing. Alongside that, we have these frequent presentations of celebrities who, we see them pregnant and they actually look very fit for a pregnant person, which is not at all the norm for most women in the United States anyway. And then very soon after pregnancy, they not only have their pre-pregnancy body back, as if that's even a thing to say that someone could have the body you had before you were pregnant. Your body changes significantly. They often look better than they did before they get pregnant. This is a highly unrealistic image to put out there, and yet we see it all over the place. Here's a model. Before, you can barely tell she's pregnant. After, she does not look like she's ever carried a baby. This puts forth a standard that many women are trying to live up to that's very unrealistic when we consider that celebrities have cooks and nannies and personal trainers and all these different things the average woman does not have. The idea of a woman getting her pre-baby body back is in heavy circulation in women's magazines and tabloids. Jessica Alba had a big discussion about how she lost her baby weight. Her method was wearing 2 corsets day and night for 3 months post-pregnancy. As a result of this claim, corset sales soar. The science says there is no data to suggest that wearing a corset actually leads to weight loss. Another big explanation that celebrities often give is that, I've just lost it all in the first months. I've had this dramatic weight loss because of breastfeeding, and yet lactation activists say there's no scientific evidence that breastfeeding actually leads to weight loss. So why is all this fiction out there? Okay, well, this goes right into the first fiction of celebrity motherhood, the idea that it's effortless. Never mind the staff of help that most of them employ. A second fiction of celebrity motherhood, you haven't really changed physically or otherwise. This is emblematic of the supermom mystique. The supermom mystique is based on this idea that you can have a career, be a loving mom, look incredible. You can have it all. All of it can be had. It's a cultural label that allows allows a mother to experience role overload and regard herself as particularly efficient, energetic, and confident. It's sort of this cultural cover-up of the overworked and frustrated woman. Historians trace its creation to the 80s and 90s and that cultural depiction of mothers and the cultural depiction of mothers that we're seeing right now. The danger of the supermom mystique is that it's a powerful Trojan horse of the having it all myth. It suggests that if women just try hard enough and just love their kids enough, they too could be both the best version of their new selves and their old selves as well. It denies the central truth about transition into parenthood, which is you must leave some of that old self behind. You are not the same person that you were, just like you're not the same person you are after any significant experience in one's life. You've probably seen these pictures as well, as they both went viral. Many of them, sorry, many people have complained about these particular pictures. One of them, the one you can't see right now, is referred to as Fit Mom. And it's basically women posting pictures of themselves with their numerous children and looking fit in bikinis and saying, "What is your excuse?" The implication, of course, being, and if they can do it, you can do it also. When in fact, we know that not everyone has the same genetics, not everyone responds the same way to diet and exercise, and not everyone has the same sort of support in their life to be able to participate in that level of exercise, or the same economic opportunities to be able to eat in the same manner. In general, we have right now conspicuous motherhood. It's calling our attention or an emphasis on the performance of motherhood. We can see this in the constant verbal detailing of motherhood activities. You know, the sort of field trip mom, like this commercial here. She's the cool field trip mom because she brought the sun kissed. It's not sun kissed. What are those little pouches? Capri Suns. Thank you. Managing feelings. Working mothers may feel a lot of pressure and scrutiny. They may feel that more saliently in the face of conspicuous motherhood. Modern mothers actually spend more time with their children than moms did in the 1960s. Many women feel driven to be constantly available to their children, to make every minute a teachable moment, and many feel incredible guilt when they do not live up to ever expanding standards for involved parenting. In this transition to parenthood, women are typically disappointed in the amount of time dad spends with a new baby. Dad's engagement in parenting actually improves psychological well being, but often mothers become the gatekeepers of dad's involvement. This is most pronounced in divorced or unmarried parents. Parents report lower marital satisfaction than non parents. Mothers of infants report the most significant drop in satisfaction. The higher the number of children, the lower the marital satisfaction. There's a lot of conflict, loss of freedom. Those are sort of the chief factors in that. Women report the deepest decline in levels of happiness after parenthood, and couples report more commitment to marriage despite the fact their marital happiness levels have declined. So, how happy you are in your marriage declines, but you're more committed to staying because of these kids. And the more kids you have, the less likely you are to divorce. The challenges to single parenthood include, but are not limited to, having to respond to demands with limited help, meeting everyone's emotional needs, meeting your own emotional needs, meeting your own sexual needs, a lack of money, and coping with the absence of the other parent's influence. There are a lot of children in the United States who are only living with one parent, and we can see that race doesn't play a super significant role in terms of that involvement. Father absent homes are a big concern in popular discourse. There's a common narrative that children in father absent homes graduate high school less, attend college less, perform worse on standardized tests, more likely to use drugs, has a bigger impact on boys than girls. But the data shows us that nearly 70% of children from father absent homes do graduate from high school, and 50% of them attend college. The strength of single parent homes are strong parent child communication, a network of community support, and high levels of adolescent autonomy. The bottom line is children bring a lot of challenges to a couple's dynamic. The presence of both parents is considered the ideal, but it is not the reality for many children in the United States. However, all is not lost if a child lives in a single parent